And that leads us to maybe the most important question in terms of the process by which you work through these rankings. And that's, how often do you update these bad boys? Is there a regular cadence you try to stick to? Do you just tweak it whenever there's news or anything going on? What's the time frame by which you're updating these rankings?
That's a great question. So first year I did it, it was really it was kind of tweak when I had time in the off season because I was building the model. And then during the season I didn't update them at all because I didn't have the time. So far this off season, what I've done has mainly been surrounded by news, but like this off season's been great because there's been news like every week it seems like. So I've been tweaking them. I feel like a little bit more frequently, but it's easier tweak because the model's already built for the most part. I'm not having to tweak the grading scale or tweak anything like that. I'm just kind of like, okay, this person changed teams and maybe that helps this quarterback's weapons go up or their opportunity goes up, or and then this person's opportunity drops because this person's been added. Different things like that. So it's kind of been, and I'll typically do it in bulk processes. It's not like I'm tweaking it every day or every week, even with how frequently we have had news. But I'm trying to keep it current during the off season at least. And I think this season, because I won't be writing as much, I don't think I'll have more time to update them in season. But I still, with them being dynasty rankings specifically, I don't think you need to update your dynasty rankings as frequently in season as you do like your redraft rankings, obviously.
So up until that last statement, I feel like I had a pretty good follow up question. Now that you said it, I think it at least sort of leads into how you think about this. But my question itself was, during the off season, this is a player evaluation tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once we get to in season, are you still pretty steadfast on that being the case, or are you changing anything about this or changing how you use this to maybe inform lineup decisions or things like that?
I didn't for year one
Okay.
because, again, there was a lack of time to truly update it as I probably needed to in season. I think this year, with having slightly more time and being able to do so, I could probably see myself doing that a little bit more.
Makes sense. So the next question that I wanted to touch on is the next question I wanted to pose is actually one that we touched on a little bit earlier, and that is around some of these more subjective tiers within your categories or your
Mhm.
scales. I feel like we spent a good amount of time there. So instead, I want to double back to something we talked about or at least introduced a little bit earlier, and that's some of these half points on the
Mhm.
various ratings on players.
Yep.
Why have a 1 to 5 scale if you're going to give a half point to a player?
The way you worded that question, I was not prepared to answer. Um, so I'm going to answer it in the way that I was hoping you would ask the question. I think, again, like you and I've talked about throughout the previous episode, and we'll probably talk about throughout this episode, is this is fairly subjective still. I'm
Mhm.
adding in those numbers to make it to pull out the Shane, if you will, the Shane effect, and make it more like this is your scale, this is what you do, blah 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 blah. But there are certain cases, I guess, where I've given a player a 4.5, and it's like they technically scored a 4, but where I think they really are is closer to that 5, but maybe that quantitative number has pulled it down to a 4. So because I want them, because I know I have it weighted, I want to give them a little bit of a boost. So I'll throw them at a 4.5 because they haven't earned that 5 yet. but I think they should be higher than a straight 4, which I think, Eric, leads to a question that we talked about, or something that we talked about last episode, which is it's 1 to 5. And that was kind of the basis of this question. It's only 1 to 5. I have been battling with myself over the last 2 or 3 months of like, do I need to expand this scale from 1 to 5 to 1 to 10 even, and make it more so that it can more finely grade out those players. And I think what really inspired me was the episode with Heath Cummings where we talked about QB and RB rankings initially. And I think his scale was like out of like, I don't even know. He said he had like someone score like an 870 or something, if I remember correctly. So it's like
He's got a 1 to 32 scale.
yeah, something like that. He's awesome, by the way. But I've been playing with the idea of somehow expanding the scale, even if it's not necessarily expanding the 1 to 5, but somehow tweaking the weighted system. Like you guys will see, I've got the custom weightings tab here, and I'm not gonna show you guys that too long. But figuring out a way to change and manipulate that to where it kicks out different numbers better, if that makes sense, or more
So
distinguished numbers.
you are not going to show our guests and our viewers that weighted tab much longer,
Not
but
right
I
now.
will instead force you to, at least by way of the question that I'm going to ask. Going back to the last question about the updates that you're making on these
Mm-hmm.
rankings, if you had to kind of split it out as a pie chart, what percentage of those tweaks, those updates that you're making, are to the actual player categories themselves, and what percentage of those tweaks are in this custom weightings tab that you've now pulled up?
That's a great question, honestly, Eric. I I'm trying to think how to answer this because I know exactly how I want to answer. So, like, for example, Russell Wilson gets traded to Denver. His weapons, in my opinion, upgraded just slightly. He gets better running back. He gets similar wide receiver 1 and 2, potentially, maybe a little bit more depth and a better tight end. Better situation for Russ Wilson. So in that, I'm going to tweak his weapons grade on the actual QB tab.
Mm.
But like we were talking about last episode with Mooney, and who the freak was it? Oh, actually, I'm glad I went with Russell Wilson, because if we scroll down here to wide receiver 33, I have KJ Hamler. KJ Hamler does not belong there, in my opinion.
By
That
most accounts, yeah.
Yes, that is where, however, the rankings model has spit him out. And I think that is one of those cases where I went and tweaked the custom weighting tab because I was trying to, because he was even higher than that. So then I started to tweak these grades and figure out a way to knock KJ Hamler down. And so that's where I think the ultimate answer to your question is where if there's someone who is higher or even lower than I think they should be, it's not a matter of changing their specific grade. That's when it becomes a matter of I'm going to go change the weighting on the custom weighting tab.
Yeah, and this ties together beautifully. We've kind of jumped around a lot in these last two questions. We've really taken more of the Tarantino approach, but I think this is where the plot line merges together. Obviously, we're talking about process over results. I am much more of a processed purist than kind of and taking an objective approach to things.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, a subjective approach to things. Looking at your rankings, looking at KJ Hamler sitting up at 33, right?
Mm-hmm.
His speed is a 5. His age is a 5, right? Like
Yeah.
these points of evaluation are true about him. Couple that with the fact that all over these rankings, you've got a lot of point fives sitting in here. It would
Mm-hmm.
seem to me that all arrows point to this custom weighting, right? Like if you're going in there and giving someone a half a tier advantage in whatever category, to me that says we need to double click on this custom weighting and make the weights balance out to where you don't feel so inclined to give someone an edge up or an edge down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I think the counter, I don't even know if counterpoint's the right word here, but the next step, I guess, isn't even necessarily tweaking the weighting for each position even. I think it's adding a couple more categories
Mm.
to help quantify it, which is something that I've also been battling with myself is like, do I have the time to actually do that?
Oh
Um,
man, we're gonna take a left turn on this show.
okay, let's go.
So we don't have to finalize anything. I know that you have commitment issues, and we love you for who you are. But I really love the idea of adding some more evaluation categories.
Yeah.
If you have a couple that you've been kicking around, what are some of the different categories that are maybe kind of next up or that you would like to introduce across any or all of the different positions in your rankings?
Yeah, so the for QB specifically, I want to figure out a way to specify this weapons category.
Mm.
Um, and that is really probably just spreadsheet work that I'm not capable of. But really like pull in the running back, wide receiver, and tight end that is on each team to actually come up with a weapons grade for
I mean,
that
do you
quarterback.
do you even really need a grade, right? Like you can just go into so there's two questions there. One, couldn't you just go into your wide receiver tab and pull the cumulative score of all of that quarterback's pass catchers? Um,
Yeah, well, and I
and
think
highest
that's
score is a more desirable set of weapons, right?
yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to say.
It's a
Um,
way.
yeah,
Probably not the most scientific way.
yeah, and I think that's where I'm running into it is like, what's the most scientific way? What's the most accurate way to get all of that compiled into where like if I change my wide receiver rankings, it changes the quarterback weapons grade. Is essentially what
Yeah.
I think what I was playing at there. With running back, so like the I've got the average separation for wide receivers. I
Mhm.
want at least one more advanced metric for running backs, and I'm not sure
Mm.
where to go with that. I think maybe
We've got
broken tackle rate would be one. Um,
rusher, we've got receiver, we've got opportunity, points per game, and
age,
age are the five categories there. Yeah,
which
I would think
if I
I think
remember,
broken tackles makes a lot of sense, right?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is the one with the lowest amount of grades, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So it is one short of it of every other category. So that's kind of where why I want to tweak that. I think with it and with with running back and with wide receiver, I would want to somehow quantify volume as well, which obviously that kind of leans towards that opportunity grade.
Mhm.
But that's kind of been the whole thing is like start subjective and then pull some objective in to kind of mesh in the middle.
Yeah. So with that concept, I mean, you started to encapsulate that back when we were talking about quarterbacks, right?
Mhm.
And specifically when we were talking about these categorizations or these tiers as a passer, as a rusher, through the elite, very good, average, below average, and gross categories.
Yeah.
And I lit up like a Christmas tree as you were saying that The elite classification is the 5 highest scorers.
Mm-hmm.
But then very good is a group of 6. And
Yep.
average is a group of 10 or of 12, right? So
Yeah.
if we're talking about trying to quantify the opportunity for running backs and for wide receivers, I think as long as you're doing it in a similar way, right? You can just literally go 1 to
Well, and that's
35 or 1 to 50, but break them into more specific or smaller cohorts based on just how difficult it is to get into that top tier, that second tier. I
yeah,
think that would really perform nicely in the calculation of your model.
yeah, 100%. Well, and that's kind of what I've tried to do with each position, like is and each category within those positions is really come up with like a tier essentially of like, okay, these are the top 5 in this category, and then the next 6, and then the next, I think it's probably 12 to 15 typically,
Sounds about
and
right.
then next 10, and then whoever's left. So
Hmm.
but yeah.
Specifically trying to hone in on the 6th category for running backs.
Hmm.
Not Shane's model in this spreadsheet, but Shane's thoughts in his head. What is it that you care about when it comes to evaluating running backs?
Oh, that's a great question.
And as you think through this, I will I'll give you the courtesy stall. I kind of feel like either broken tackles or evaded tackles is
Hmm.
probably the next one to consider. Um, but if you're thinking of running backs as largely interchangeable and you're just trying to get the upside of the guys that can get a score, maybe it's like a red zone opportunity metric, right? Um, a
It
lot of these,
may.
actually, both of these that I mentioned, are quantified very cleanly over on Player Profiler. Um, so
Yeah.
there might be something to taking a spin through there and figuring out which is the next category to introduce because 5 does feel kind of light, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've got at least 6 for every other one. The thing that I want from a running back, oh, and it's so hard to quantify, especially with where the NFL is going.
Mm-hmm.
It may end up being something like snap share, which I guess is essentially still opportunity. But that's what I'm looking for in a running back
Mm-hmm.
is, are they on the field and are they dominating touches
So
within the
what's
offense?
interesting, specifically in the context of where today's NFL is heading, for more and more players, for more and more running backs specifically, snap share and opportunity share are two entirely different
Yeah,
statistics, right?
yeah.
Um, I was debating whether or not Ezekiel Elliott should be drafted for a short piece for Jeff over at Going for Two. Might even be up on his YouTube now, Going for Two Network. If you're not already subscribed over there, do it. Jeff is putting out great work.
Subscribe to Going for Two.
Um, but
I wouldn't be here without
specifically
that.
looking at Ezekiel Elliott, he was like running back 25 in opportunity share, but he was like running back 11 in snap share.
Hmm.
So the very simple calculation there, he's on the
And
field alongside Tony Pollard a fair amount, right? Like he's seeing the field, but he's not seeing a requisite share of opportunity. And I
so
think that's a trend that is going to continue to proliferate across the league.
you just hit it.
Um,
You just hit it on the head. That's exactly what I need to do.
hmm.
Because hot take of the summer, Kyron Williams is the best back in the LA Rams backfield.
Whoa.
And I think we see that for a similar reason that you just talked about with Zeke. And that, my friend, is pass blocking. Kyron Williams is the
Oh.
best pass blocking back in this 2022 rookie class. I've said it for months now that if Kyron Williams was not on the field in 2020 when Notre Dame and Clemson played, Ian Book would be buried on that field. Because Kyron Williams was pass blocking like a mother trucker to save Ian Book's life. Stonewalling guys, Eric. I'm talking guys that are 6'3", 250, run a 4.4 40, coming for Ian Book's head. And Kyron Williams' 5'9", 195 ass is just like, nope, stops them dead in their tracks. He had a pretty good game when it comes to rushing and passing in that game too. But the thing that stood out to me was his pass blocking. And I think that's where, with this opportunity share versus snap share that we were talking about, he gets more snaps as a pass blocker. And that's going to lead to more opportunity for him, I think, later on down the road. Whereas with Zeke, I think his opportunity share is decreasing because he's slowing down a bit because he's been utilized throughout his first, 5 years in the NFL now?
Hmm.
He's one of a handful of backs, I think, to have over 300 carries in multiple seasons. So I think his wear and tear is higher because of that. So his snap share is staying high, but his usage is dropping. And some people will argue because Tony Pollard is a better back. I don't personally think so. I think Zeke is a better all-around back. He's just lost a little bit of explosiveness due to his utilization previously. So I feel like the question that you've asked, and this is a really long-winded answer, but I think that snap share scale, maybe even snap share and pass blocking, are something that would need to be added to the model for running backs.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, right, like as you're talking through it, all of the other positions have more evaluation categories. And specifically, if you look over at tight ends, you look over at wide receivers, they have more of the prototypical kind of draft evaluation categories in there, right? Hands, route running, separation. Like these are things that NFL teams are considering and trying to get a good gauge on when they make a decision to draft or not to draft a player.
Total side
Whereas,
note, to interrupt you real quick, wide receiver is my favorite position to scout. So that
yeah,
is probably why they are the most developed and have the most categories, is because they're my favorite to watch and scout.
so with that, running back is the only position that doesn't really have some of these traditional scouting and draft evaluation categories in there, right? Age, rushing ability, receiving ability, opportunity, points per game, right? If you were to introduce a pass blocking metric in there, or at least a pass blocking measurement, and sort of introduce some of those more kind of draft evaluation components to your rankings model for running backs, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of guys shift pretty dramatically, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Super interesting. Anything on the tight end world that you would consider adding as your next evaluation category, or hadn't put much thought into that yet?
Oh, I haven't. And I know on not the last episode that we recorded tonight, but the last episode where we were talking wide receivers and tight ends, you made fun of me for having blocking on there. But that actually, tying that back into the conversation we were just having with running backs, you aren't going to score points for pass blocking as a running back. You're not going to score fantasy points for blocking. But the reason I have that on there is because blocking as a tight end is going to get you on the field if you're good at it, unless you are a freak of an athlete like Kyle Pitts.
Or
So,
according to your model, Mark Andrews, right?
yeah.
Among your top 10, he's easily the lowest in terms of his blocking grade.
Yeah, and I think part of that also has to do with the fact, just with the way that I know Andrews is used. Like Andrews is essentially the Travis Kelce of the Baltimore Ravens offense. He is their wide receiver one, especially now that Tyreek Hill is gone for Kansas City. Like Mark Andrews is that guy for Baltimore. Even when Hollywood Brown was there, it was Andrews as the number one target, in my opinion. So he's not going to necessarily block as much. So I think that's why his blocking grade is lower than others.
So this might not pertain to your rankings model specifically, but I think Mark Andrews is a decent example of this sort of on the other end of the spectrum. It does feel like for tight ends specifically, if they are quote unquote too strong at blocking, they run the risk of being sort of typecast in that way, right? They don't go
Mm-hmm.
out on routes and they stay in to protect more often.
Yeah.
Is there, I guess, is there any thought or any way to try to capture that in your model? Or is that something that, look, outright talent is going to rise to the top? And if someone happens to be a fantastic blocker like George Kittle, but is also incredibly strong in every other area, the offense is going to find a way to get him the ball.
I think it's more the latter for sure. I think if they are a super strong blocker, but also just a freak of an athlete with huge yak ability like George Kittle, then the blocking isn't going to typecast them like you were talking about. But like, I'm jumping into Madden a little bit here just because it's what's on the mind, I guess. But like Mercedes Lewis in Madden is like one of the best blocking tight ends. And I think I heard them talking about that on a Packers broadcast this past year too. Like Mercedes Lewis is a phenomenal blocking tight end. Because of that, he gets typecast into that. I don't even think I have Mercedes Lewis ranked because he's 400 years old. But that might be an example of someone who gets typecast into that, and because of that, his opportunity score drops. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it does. I'm chewing in my own head if there's a way to try to capture that, but I don't think there's one that really scales over the
Yeah.
entire player pool for tight end.
Well, let
So
me ask you this. So
yeah,
the six, right? Yeah, six categories for tight ends are hands, route running, blocking, opportunity, age, and fantasy points per game. What do you think would be the, I guess, ideal ad for a category for tight end specifically?
so that's tricky. I think we probably stick with the Mark Andrews Baltimore example,
Mm-hmm.
and it might even be sort of a zoomed out categorization, maybe even a play on opportunity, which is
Yeah.
how much the tight end is featured in that offense.
Yeah.
So not necessarily an opportunity split to that player in particular, but what percentage of all passes are going to a tight end?
Yeah.
Route
Well,
participation, right? Like how often is a tight end going out there and
maybe
running a
routes
route in
run.
general?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Well, you
because
bring up a good point because like Jeremy Ruckert is rookie tight end for the Jets now.
mhm,
He went to Ohio State. They don't throw to their tight ends,
that's right.
but he's a decent prospect that you may want to throw a dart at in rookie drafts because of his athletic profile. But if you look at solely production, it's probably not going to get you there because that's just the way the Ohio State offense works. So I think that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I was kind of struggling to pinpoint what the metric is, but the player that I had in mind when I was rambling through that was Trey McBride, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's behind Zach Ertz on that depth chart. Zach Ertz has a pretty sizable contract that was recently given to him,
Mm-hmm.
but whenever Zach Ertz ages out of that leading or starting role in Arizona, there isn't a better system that's probably a bit hyperbolic. The system, the scheme that Arizona runs is fantastic for the tight ends. And I think that that should boost Trey McBride's dynasty value, even though he likely won't see the benefit of that for a couple years to come.
But that is where I need to verify this. That's almost where I feel like you could make the point, like how we talked about with quarterbacks, the age range for a 1 or a 5 is 20 to 28. With tight ends, I've got it at 20 to 20, 21 to 24. I don't know why I picked 21 instead of 20. Who knows? But that's almost one of those things where I feel like we could even expand that 5 category because tight ends take longer to develop. And so playing into that Trey McBride situation specifically, like I feel like he's the perfect example of he's behind a veteran tight end. He's probably the tight end one in this class, but because tight ends take 3 years typically to develop, he may fall into one of those opportunity shares later on that like you were just talking about, like he's going to smash that opportunity, but his age will, as he gets older, obviously drop him down those categories. So it's kind of like, I guess, playing devil's advocate with yourself or with myself, where do I expand that age range for tight ends specifically in the same thought of quarterbacks being 20 to 28? Am I making sense?
You are. I'm giddy over here because I'm going to throw another curveball at you.
Ah, shit.
Look at look at your dynasty rankings for tight ends, and
Okay.
specifically look at the age of everybody, the age score of everybody inside of your top 10. Apart from the unicorn that is Kyle Pitts,
Mm-hmm. They're
none of them are younger
and
than
TJ
24. We
Hawkinson,
don't we don't see, yeah, TJ Hawkinson. I think he turns
which I
25
think I
this
need to
year, right?
update that. Yeah.
I think he's turning 25, maybe over the summer, early in the season. But point being, we don't see tight ends break out in their first 2 or 3 years in the league. So what I would posit is actually take the 25 to 28-year-old range
Mm-hmm.
and make that a 5.
Oh, so like flip it, like make
Yeah,
21 to 20 or yeah, 21 to 24 a 4 and 25 to 28 or whatever the hell it is a 5.
that's right.
I actually love that. And that's kind of what was going on in my brain too. I like that a lot actually.
Because I mean, Kyle Pitts is so incredibly unique in terms of what he
100%.
is and what he's doing in the NFL. But apart from
Which
him, like you're so rarely getting top 10, top 12 contribution from a
rookie
23 or
pick.
24-year-old tight end.
Yes. Shout out to any Devy players or even Dynasty players. There's 2 names that you need to keep on your radar that are going to be Kyle Pitts-esque. Michael Mayer for the 2023 class, tight end out of Notre Dame. I know I'm biased, and I know Eric is laughing at me right now because I'm biased. But Michael Mayer has the nickname Baby Gronk for a reason. He's freaking good. But then in the 2024 class, the arguable Devy tight end 1, for anybody not named Shane Barrett, is Brock Bowers out of Georgia. That kid can play. If you are a dynasty manager, you need to have both of these guys' names on your list because they can be Kyle Pitts-esque to where they produce in year 1 or year 2 because they are that good. And now I'm off my soapbox.
I am giggling over here because in your glowing review of Michael Myers, you basically said all of the things that Cole Kmet stands have been saying 2 years prior to him getting in the
Oh,
league, and now
100%. Well, I'm
as
a
we
Cole Kmet
continue to
stan
wait for
too.
him to break out.
I'm a Cole Kmet stan too. Michael Myers better than Cole Kmet ever was.
Okay.
100%. Like
As long as you're willing to plant your flag in that and not just do the Notre Dame tight end plays good in NFL
no, I mean
rinse and repeat, then I'm here for it.
that's part of it, but I'm also a Notre Dame fan, so like I've watched a lot of them. Cole Kmet was good.
Yeah,
Cole Kmet was good in college. I think he'll be a good tight end. He's only in year 3, like we just fucking
we
talked
just said
about.
it.
But Michael Mayer can be that dude in year 1. Like I said this either as a guest or on my own show a month or 2 ago, I think. If Kyle Pitts and Mike Meyer were in the same class, personally, I would have struggled to pick between the two because that's how high I am on Michael Meyer. I know,
Fair.
and part of that too, like admittedly, is the Notre Dame bias of being a Notre Dame fan. But at the same time, like I truly believe Michael Meyer is that good.
Well, you certainly have arguably more hours than anyone watching him and watching Notre Dame games. So
Yeah.
definitely something that I will put a lot of stock in. I want to get back to this second round here.
Yeah.
We've got one more question, and then time permitting, we're going to go kind of rapid fire in the third round. The last question is I want to know if there's a time where this model spit out something that you inherently disagreed with. And is that something where you take it at face value, right? I put faith in this model, or is that something where you go in and really evaluate the inputs that are leading to that result?
Oh, 100%. There have been a few times, like specifically like recently with like Kyle Pitts or not, KJ Hamler. Like KJ Hamler, I think was a top 20 dynasty receiver because of the model. And so I went and tweaked that to be like, what the hell is going on right now? Like, why are you so high? So went and tweaked the model. Another very specific instance is actually in the tight ends. So before I added, and I think was actually the motivating factor specifically for tight ends to add in points per game was Pat Fryermuth. Before Pat Fryermuth had played a snap, I had him as Dynasty tight end 6 in the model. Had no idea why. I was like, I do not understand why this is happening. I like Pat Fryermuth. I think if Pat Fryermuth was in this class, he would be talked about to a lesser extent, but as a clear-cut Dynasty tight end 1, or not Dynasty tight, yeah, Dynasty tight end 1 for any other class except the one that he was in because Kyle Pitts was there. Like if he'd come out in 2020, he would have been above Cole Kmet. If he'd come out in 2022, he's easily above Trey McBride for me. If he comes out in 2023, I'm still taking Michael Meyer. But
Put that faith to the test.
But again, he's very close to, in my opinion, Pitts, Meyer, Bowers, and belongs in that discussion. But I wasn't ready to fully commit to that when he was a rookie. And I was like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to drop him down in the model. And that was where I kind of tweaked. And I think, like I mentioned, added the actual points per game for the tight end position to get him to drop a little bit more. So we could actually see what he would develop into in year 1.
That makes sense. I mentioned that was going to be the last drink of our second round here, process over results. Since I am the substitute bartender, I want to get a quick time check with you, Shane. Shane, do we have time for a little bit of bonus round, or do we need to start wrapping this thing up?
Let's get it. I'm here. Let's do it.
All right. So this bonus round, I'm assuming most people that are tuning in have a pretty good idea of who you are. We can kind of skip over the get to know you bit. What I wanted to do specifically is I wanted to look at a couple areas where your model is a good bit separate or away from ECR.
Yeah.
And the first one, shout out to our guy G-Men J, was just litigated on Twitter today, and that is Justin Herbert, ECR QB3 in Dynasty. You've got him all the way down at 6. What is the matter with you? How has your model failed you in such a tremendous way?
So this may be a slight oversight, a slight bit of oversight. When Justin Herbert came out, I was much lower on him than I should have been. I have since severely flip-flopped. So when he came out as a rookie, the thing that stuck in my mind is it's going to be team bias again, okay? I'm an Auburn fan. His senior year, he played Auburn for the first game. Auburn won that game, not because of their offense, okay? Admittedly. If you know me, you know I absolutely cannot stand Gus Malzahn. He is the worst coach in America to me because he has ruined the careers of any quarterback that he has coached, including Bo Nix. Bo Nix made a decent throw to win the game. But Auburn's defense that year was stout. I think they allowed maybe 20 points a game, which in college football is phenomenal, especially in the SEC with how the SEC and the offense is growing. They were a very good defense. So what worried me about Herbert was I didn't think he had it between the ears. I didn't know if his decision making was going to be good enough. I didn't think he was going to be able to pull his team through to a win, which, I mean, I guess if you look at it, technically still may stand true. But after watching him in the NFL, his arm talent is bar none one of the top ones. So that's where I think it may be an oversight. I may need to upgrade his passer rating to a 5 because I've only got it as a 4. And I have his rushing as a 3. And that to me is, I think, perfect. The way I categorize a 3 is someone who is a capable rusher, but it's not their first weapon or even their second weapon. It's not if the play breaks down, they're able to get you 10 yards every single play. With Herbert, he's a capable rusher. He can go out and get you 10 yards if the play breaks down, but he's not looking to do that as a first or second instinct. And so that's where I have him as a 3. Opportunities a 5, weapons are a 3, and I think that's a fair evaluation.
Oh,
You got Keenan
that was
Allen.
my question for you.
Okay. He's got Keenan Allen. He's got Mike Williams, who's after week 3, I think, fell off the face of the earth relative to weeks 1 through 3. Josh Palmer, I think, has a ton of upside, but still hasn't proven enough to be there. Eckler's had health issues the last couple of years, but is a very good back. After that, there's not much, in my opinion. So I think that's where I've got him as a 3.
That was where I wanted to go with the question, and it illustrates a point, right? Like that is, I mean, categorically, what is dragging him down, right? If he was a 3.5 somehow or a 4 in that category, I think he's right there in kind of the 3 or 4 spot.
Well,
but
Eric, because you asked, let's play with this a little bit. Let's bump him up to a 5, which I think is what he should truly be for a passer, because his arm talent is, like we said, yeah. So that bumps him up to 4. I'm good with that, 4. Making that move live on air.
Right now, live. The point that I was getting at is with his weapons sitting at 3, it also illustrates that you're kind of out on Mike Williams, right?
Relatively, yeah.
It's one of those areas where how you quantifiably rank and evaluate these players can tell you so much more about the other players that share the field with them. The other, and I'll say the other, it's actually the largest discrepancy that I found anywhere on this sheet, at least tied for the largest. Derek Carr. ECR's got him at 16. You have him down at 24. Mm-hmm. What did Derek Carr do to you?
Nothing. I actually like Derek Carr quite a bit. I think looking at it, his opportunity is probably technically too low. Maybe he needs to be a 3.5 because you like those half points.
There's my friend the half.
Or even a 4. But at the same time, like, to me, Derek Carr isn't going to win you a fantasy matchup, right? Most likely. That may change with Devontae Adams, which is where, again, that's where those tweaks can come in. But I think evaluation-wise, I've got him right probably where he needs to be. Like, passing is a 4. He's a good passer. Rushing, he's not going to run the ball unless he really and truly needs to. Again, opportunity is probably where needs some work. His weapons, he's got a 4, though. I love Devontae Adams. Darren Waller is a top 5 tight end. Hunter Renfrow, the accountant, love him. I'm worried with Renfrow specifically about how Adams will eat into that, but I still think Renfrow's a good weapon. And then Josh Jacobs, I love Josh Jacobs. Hold on, we're gonna click over to that real quick. Wow, I think I've got him at RB15, right behind Nick Chubb. And part of that is probably because of the usage that he's received so far. But so that puts Derek Carr, his weapons at a 4, and I think that's decent. His age is a 4, and his points per game, that's probably honestly what's driving him down as far as it is his points per game is only a 2. If he were able to produce with the weapons that he's got, I think he'd end up much higher. Again, I do think I need to upgrade that opportunity to a 3.5 maybe, though, to really bump that in. We'll just edit this out.
It was only a matter of time.
That's cool, man. We can edit this out.
So, oh, you can't hear you. You're in my ear.
Oh, well, he can see me wave.
Sammy, you see Mr. Shane?
He's tired.
Yeah. I heard his little pitter patter, and then he got to my room and saw that I was not in there and started freaking out. He's like, "They finally left me."
That's funny.
Hey, Sammy. What do you need?
Water.
You want some water? Don't drink that water. Or that water. Let me get him some water.
Ew.
Yeah, no worries.
Those cups are disgusting.
Yeah, those cups are disgusting. Unless you're daddy.
Roll Tide. I'm gonna sleep good tonight. Man, it is 11:50. Fuck.
Yo. Yo.
Hi.
Sorry.
It's all right. Shit happens.
So you went basically all the way through that Derek Carr
Mhm.
answer with me muted and camera off.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know if you care to keep that in there, but I mean, you gave a good answer.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll keep it in there, and we can just edit this little like 2-3 minute chunk out.
Right? Or you could take a still of my face and then just drop it over where the stop
I'm
camera
not that
image
talented,
was.
nor do I care enough.
Cool. So I had 3 more discrepancies to touch on.
Let's
You
hit
maybe
it.
just want to hit like one more and then jump into
Yeah.
last call.
No, we can hit all 3.
You sure?
Yeah.
I
I don't give a fuck.
well on my side, I don't know if dude's gonna stay in his bed that long.
If it's only 3, we should be able to hit them pretty quickly.
Cool. Do you see him in there? It's Saquon, it's CD Lamb, and it's Cooper Cup.
Yeah. Let's jump over to Saquon. All right.
And how do I wrap this thing out?
I can
Last
wrap it up for you.
call. Okay.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up for you. I'll wrap it up so that way you can plug yourself and Pros with Joe and whatnot.
So many things to plug.
It's okay. It's not as
I
many as
always
Nate.
feel like a straight up jerk. People are like, anything you want to shout out? I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I promise it's not as many as Nate, so it's okay.
Oh God, dude's everywhere.
Yes. All right.
I don't know how he does it.
3.
Wait, don't count me in yet. So you just finished your Derek Carr answer.
Yep.
And I'm gonna go into Saquon.
Yep.
All right, count me in whenever you're ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And I mentioned that Derek Carr was tied for the biggest discrepancy between ECR and your rankings. The person that he's tied with is Saquon Barkley. You are actually much higher on Saquon than consensus. He is your RB5. Consensus ECR has him at RB13. Walk us through why your model likes Saquon so much.
Man, I think this probably ends up going to what we discussed earlier, where running back is the least, I guess, galvanized is maybe the word I want to use, least dug into position, which I don't know why. I like running backs, but it's probably because with running backs, I'm just looking for, like, I want that volume essentially. And so I think with Saquon specifically, maybe his opportunity is probably too high because of injury risk. And that's something that I haven't necessarily factored into the opportunity score previously. The talent for me is still there, no question about it. The problem with Saquon has always been being on the field. And so I think right now that's probably why I am higher on him than consensus, is just simply because I still believe in the talent. And I think long term, I'm hoping long term that will pay off for me. Because, I mean, he's what, 25, I think. But if you look at like years in the league and carries in the league, he's probably 23 ish, if you look at it that way, because he's missed a year or two due to injury. So I think probably that's where I need to figure out a way to kind of modify that to where injury is played into a little bit more, specifically with Saquon and probably a few other players across the different positions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's either there should be call for making a injury concern category,
Mm-hmm.
or injury concern and injury history should arguably play a role in opportunity and in age, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's blown their knee out 3 times, even if they're 24, probably runs like a 27-year-old, right? So something
And as a
considering, maybe that's
27-year-old
a category.
who's not in the NFL, if you run like me, you're going to get tackled.
So let's shift over to the wide receiver room. There's actually 2 guys that don't have quite as large a discrepancy, but I think they're interesting guys to talk about. I was actually a little surprised to see this. ECR has CeeDee Lamb as wide receiver 3. Your model is a bit
Really?
closer to where I put him. I've got him at 5. Your model has him at 6. So maybe kind of on the other side of this, right? Thus far, we've been looking at guys and trying to pinpoint, what's sort of dragging them down.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at CeeDee Lamb here, what do you think is maybe driving up his consensus value relative to what you have in your model?
I have no idea. So I think the thing that would probably drive him up in ECR would be opportunity, but I've got him as a 5.
You got him as a 5, yeah.
I think this may be where my points per game, possibly, like for me specifically, might be driving him down just a little bit. And just for context too, so like my top 5 for Dynasty wide receivers is Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, and Deebo Samuel. The difference and their total scores out of 5, Jefferson's a 4.42, Chase is a 4.36, Waddle's a 4.3. Shit, who's 4? Adams is a 4.17, and then Deebo's a 4.07, and CeeDee Lamb is a 4.06, and I've got Calvin Ridley right behind him at also a 4.06. So if we probably expand that out to multiple decimal points, that's probably where the discrepancy between CD and Calvin Ridley comes in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably the factor is fantasy points per game that's driving CeeDee Lamb down in my model to put him at wide receiver 6. I would be fine with having him at wide receiver 3, according to ECR. I'm apparently just super high on Waddle, and I think the other thing too is probably average separation. So, like Jefferson and Chase, they run away with everything: route running, hands, speed, opportunity. Quarterback for Jefferson's a little iffy, but then age and fantasy points per game, they blow everything out of the water. Waddle, where he kind of, I guess, beats them. He beats them significantly in average separation. He's a 4. They're both 2s. Lamb is a 3. Deebo's a 3. Devontae is a 3. So I think that might be what's driving CeeDee Lamb down, as well as that average separation that we talked about.
Yeah, the thing for me that I think gives more credence to your model is really fantasy points per game is playing a huge role in him being, quote unquote, down to 6. Yeah. And to me, I think that really illustrates like people are getting out over their skis a little bit on CeeDee Lamb, right? Like they're projecting him to have this fantastic year, and he certainly has some vacated targets that he can gobble up. But we haven't seen him do it yet. So it feels like 3 is probably a bit of a reach for CeeDee Lamb more than 6 being an undervaluation.
Yeah, I think 3 is a ceiling.
Yeah.
Realistically. Like Jefferson and Chase, like easily 1 and 2. And I just recently moved Jefferson above Chase, and it's because I had to make his opportunity at 5, like we talked about. Yeah. And that's what, like, everything else withstanding, I think they're tied in everything but 2 categories, which are quarterback and fantasy points per game. So with Lamb, he's right there with them on pretty much everything but fantasy points per game. He's significantly lower than both of them. But I think his upside leans towards that ECR of 3. But I think a valuation of 6 is probably more realistic right now. If he goes out and balls out this year, which is an easy possibility, he can easily jump to number 3. But I'm fine. If you have CeeDee Lamb anywhere in your top 10, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. I guess my point is like, if someone's willing to give you, Devontae Adams plus for CeeDee Lamb, he's ECR wide receiver 6. I'm pretty happy to be on that side of the equation, right? So these are things that, doing these random checks, really gives you a good gauge for not only how you're evaluating the players, but, the market for that player and that market valuation. The last guy that I want to touch on before we get to last call, speaking of CeeDee Lamb ceiling, is coming off of the ceiling production of all ceiling production seasons, and that's last year's wide receiver 1, Cooper Kupp. He is ECR wide receiver number 4. You've got him down all the way at number 10. Let's double click on him in the model and see where that discrepancy is born of.
So hands, I've got a 4. I probably need to upgrade that. Route running is also a 4. Probably need to upgrade that, technically. But I think where I'm comfortable with leaving him at a 4 is his average separation is a 3. So that to me kind of tells me like, okay, he's a good route runner. We know that. But his average separation of using that route running skill is where maybe he lacks a little bit, and maybe it's that athleticism, that speed, which is also a 4. Opportunities a 5. Like, that's clear cut.
Clearly.
No questions about it. Quarterback is a 4, and that's simply like basically what it did, like we talked about earlier, is took the top 5. There's your 5 on the quarterback rating. Next 6 to 7 are 5 or 4s. And then there's a decent chunk that are 3s. Then you've got your 2s, and then you've got your 1s. With where Stafford ended up based off of a points per game standpoint, puts Cooper Kupp at a 4. Age, that is probably where he's dropped. And again, like I mentioned, so CeeDee Lamb is a 4.06, and Ridley's a 4.06. I don't know who I have above them, but Cooper Kupp's a 4.03.
It's Hill and Diggs between Ridley and Kupp.
Yeah, so Hill then would be the 4.05. I can't see the score and the player.
Yep.
And then Diggs would be a 4.03. Tied with
right.
Cooper Kupp. So there's really, like, it's a minuscule difference, which I think, again, Eric, that leads to your point that we talked about earlier. Like, how can I truly differentiate between these players on such a simple 1 to 5 scale, which is where those 0.5s come in,
Those pesky 0.5s. I think another point that it illustrates for me is this is a really good way to identify the tier breaks in your rankings whenever you're going into startup drafts or you're going into rookie drafts, if you wanted to apply it this way, right? Like, if you look at our top 3, they're all within, essentially 1/10 of a point to each other.
Yep.
Then we've got Devontae Adams sitting in a category to his own. And then we've got this tier of, 7 or 8 guys that are all in the, 1/100th of a decimal point of 4.0. So, very much so, those pieces can kind of be treated somewhat interchangeably. So if you're in a draft and one of them slides, if you're in a draft and you're trying to get a gauge of when that tier is going to dry up, having this list handy, using it as an opportunity to maybe get a piece in a trade that's technically in the same tier, but you get a little bit on top. These are the things that, these are the margins where you're going to get an edge in the Dynasty game.
Well, and that brings up a good point, actually. You and I were talking kind of off air. I made a trade recently in a 14-team Superflex
Yeah.
league, and we're gonna tie it all back together, Eric, because we're awesome like that. I've got Joe Mixon as RB6 with a 4.16 total score. I traded Nick Chubb, who is RB14. My eyes are treating me right.
That's right.
And is at a 3.84 out of 5. So I traded Nick Chubb in a 2024 second for Joe Mixon. That almost plays into the point that you've been making the whole time, like, and kind of why I built this is like I can use this as a trade chart. Haven't yet, but what do you and I'm gonna pose this to the listeners and to anybody on Twitter, like, what do you think of that trade? Nick Chubb in a 2024 second or Joe Mixon? And I think that leads us, we're just going to leave that open-ended.
Oh,
Leads us right into our last call. Do you have anything else that you want, as the bartender, that you want to discuss before we go into the last call?
no, I think I think we've really touched it all. We've gone into some deep, dark corners of this model. I think it's, if anything, it highlights, two things. One, just the importance of getting these thoughts out of your brain grapes and into something that you can reference, right? And then really just taking a critical eye to it, right? Identifying those areas where you're different from ECR, identifying those areas where you don't like where a guy is ranked, and just ask the age-old question: why? Why is it this way? Is it
Yep.
something in my method? Is it something in the market? Is it a combination of several factors, right? Like,
Well,
these late night ponderings are what will fine tune your game and help you get better and better year over year.
well, and Eric, that brings up a phenomenal point. When it comes to me specifically, when it comes to drafting or trading, there are guys that, like, yes, I may agree with the market valuation of their price specific to drafting.
Mhm.
But relative to that, I'm not willing to take them at that price. Like, I understand why the price is there, but it's not something that I'm comfortable with. I would rather player XYZ instead of this player because I feel like their price has been driven too high.
Yeah. I mean, someone that we just talked about, for me, that fits that perfectly is Cooper Kupp, right? In dynasty startups, in redraft, like, I'm not going to have any Cooper Kupp this year because, I think it's a fair grade on, where he's being drafted, but I'm not going to take him that high if I happen to have that pick. So, for me, he falls in a few slots below. I think he's as high as like wide receiver, as the second overall pick in redraft right now.
Yeah.
And like, you can make a strong case for it, but there are probably 4 or 5 guys that I want ahead of him. So where I have the second pick, I'm not going to have him, and where I don't, he's going to be gone by the time I draft him, or by the time I'm drafting. So, all that is to say, I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of Cup in leagues where I don't already have him on my roster.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I'm in a underdog best ball draft with friend of the show, Jake Trowbridge, and he went as the third overall player behind Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. Wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
I
It's where he's
don't know
going.
if I'm even in redraft, I don't know if that's comfortable for me to take him there because he had an extremely good season. Like, outlier season, 200 targets. Like, that's very hard to repeat.
Can I borrow from our friends over at Front Yard Fantasy
Of
and
course.
toss a little trivia at you?
Of course, hit me.
So once again, shout out to Jeff. I was recording a devil's advocate piece for him, making the argument against Cooper Kupp.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stats that I pulled, do you know who the last player was to have back-to-back seasons finishing as the wide receiver 1?
Oh, I do, I think. I think we have talked about him in this episode previously. It's Antonio Brown.
It is. And for bonus points, he actually went 3 years in a row.
Yep.
So apart from Antonio Brown, who at his height was absolutely insane, it's incredibly rare to find any of the number one finishers repeating as the number one the following year.
Yeah.
And this is probably a flaw in my logic. I just I have a mental block about paying someone's ceiling price for them. He did everything you need to justify being the first wide receiver off the board and going 2 or 3 overall. I just never feel comfortable paying maximum price for anyone.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I think Trey Lance right now, I feel like Trey Lance's value is through the roof. If Trey Lance has a good season, can you really get that much more value from him than where he's being valued as right now for people other than me? Because, I'm going to go look at my QB rankings real quick. And oh, this is ugly. Where are you? Hold on.
26.
He said 26. Yeah, exactly. And part of that, there you are, you beautiful bastard. Part of that right now is his opportunity is only a 2. Because I still believe he's in a quarterback battle with Jimmy G. Jimmy G hadn't been cut. Jimmy G hadn't been traded. We've seen the 49ers start Jimmy G over Trey Lance for an entire year. What's to say that they don't go with what's comfortable and stick with Jimmy G, who has been to NFC Championship games and I believe Super Bowls as the starting quarterback.
He believes Super Bowls. He was 1 throw away from beating Patrick Mahomes that year.
No.
If he just didn't overthrow
after midnight my time,
that's fair.
I apologize for not being able to remember that.
Hey, you nailed the trivia though, so you're 1-1. But to your point, Trey Lance is as high as ECR quarterback 10.
I'm not.
And if you look at your rankings, go all the way up to 12. I feel like Jalen Hurts' season last year is the ceiling for Trey Lance, and even he is coming in below where Trey Lance is being drafted right now. So
yeah.
Definitely screams value and opportunity based on what we've seen and know of Trey Lance and how the market is treating him.
Yeah, and Trey Lance is a guy that because of market price, it's one of those guys I'm not touching. Or if I do have him, somehow I'm selling him.
Flip him.
Yeah. Shout out to Seth Keller and Dynasty Pat Loftus of the fantasy FAQs, the fantasy facts. They tweeted out a question today. Who are you buying and who are you selling in Dynasty? I'm buying Travis Etienne at the running back position because I feel like this guy, I've been super high on Etienne for years. I joke, the worst birthday present I got, I think for my 23rd birthday, was Travis Etienne declaring to go back to school.
No, I want to play you in fantasy now.
Because I had the 3rd or 4th pick in my rookie draft that year for my home league dynasty, and I was like, I am smashing the bejesus out of Travis Etienne at this pick. I don't care where he goes. It's Travis Etienne. And then literally on my birthday, I get the notification that he's going back to Clemson for his senior year. I'm like, you motherfucker.
Jerk move, Etienne.
Yeah. So I've completely lost my train of thought here with this, but sell Trey Lance. That's what it was. Trey Lance, they asked for a dynasty buy and a dynasty sell. My buy was Etienne and my sell was Lance because I feel like even if he has the season that everyone thinks that he's going to have, That's what, QB5 at best? Like, I don't see him passing Allen. I don't see him passing Mahomes. Don't see him passing Herbert. Don't see him passing Lamar. Don't see him passing Burrow. And I don't even know if that's my top 5. Pretty sure it's damn close, though.
Yeah, it is.
Tyler.
It's right there.
Tyler's the one that I missed. I don't see him passing those guys. I could see him passing Dak because Dak's rushing upside isn't as high as Lance's potential. But that still puts him at QB7.
Yeah.
People I feel like are drafting him as QB4 or 5. And I'm just like, I don't get it.
It definitely creates a nice opportunity for us to exploit, and is yet another reason for us to advocate for getting your rankings down onto paper, even if it's the most simple version of I'm going to list everyone top to bottom, right?
Yeah,
Just
100%.
getting that out there is the easiest way to identify where you are separate from the market.
Seriously, if you were wanting to start your rankings, which is the whole inspiration of this show and the previous episode, is like, if you're wanting to start your own rankings, do it.
Just start.
Get them ranked, kind of like Eric was just saying, 1 to 32, 1 to 35, because there's
Trey Lances out there mucking up the works.
There's Trey Lances and Jimmy G's. There's Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, Drew Lock and Geno Smith. There's 3 questionable situations. Matt Corral, hint, hint, wink, wink, go get him, and Sam Darnold. There's all those different situations, but get them ranked. Do some kind of your own subjective grading. I don't care what it is, but get a grade on them and build your rankings that way. And then, again, this is the ultimate question of what this whole show was about. Like, how did you start? Started completely subjective. What did I typically based on film?
Yeah.
And then slowly add in those quantitative aspects to fine tune it and pare it down to what you want it to be. Because everyone's got rankings in their head, including me. Just got to find it. So, all right. I think that wraps up this episode. Eric, I'm going to take over bartending duties for just a small minute.
Get on back here.
And ask you, where can people find you on Twitter? And is there anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah. As you so neatly did and flexed your StreamYard knowledge to me, you just pulled down my banner so you can follow me over here at Fantasy Nav on Twitter. It's where basically all of the random places that I hang out on the internet are consolidated at Fantasy Nav. Shout outs. We are ramping up our registration process for Pros with Joe's 3. More information coming out on that in the coming days and weeks. Anyone who wants to get a head start, the registration forms are already live on the website. So at Pros with Joe's on Twitter, proswithjoes.com if you want to get out in front of the rush from when we start promoting it. And my current favorite project, at least where I'm spending the vast majority of my free time and headspace, is Green Screens Media. Get Green Screens on Twitter and on TikTok. If you're over on YouTube, Green Screens Media, we are covering all things niche sports and DFS. Right now, we are on a huge college basketball kick. We are interviewing beat reporters from all of the major programs. We've got Duke and UNC queued up for this week. We have got the champion Kansas Jayhawks queued up for this week. Several more to come, multiple times every single week. So Get Green Screens or at Get Green Screens on Twitter and on TikTok is the best place to follow to find all of the work that we're doing over there.
I'm just bitter, sorry, because Auburn peaked at the wrong time this year. So,
well, you get to have the first overall pick in the draft in Jabari Smith. So that's a nice
I would love for him to go first overall. I don't know if he actually will. I think he should. His upside is Kevin Durant level,
right?
Easily. But I don't know if he'll actually end up going there. If I remember correctly from different projections, I think he'll end up going third. Which I'm fine with.
To Houston, let's go. I'll take him on the Sprockets.
So, all right. Well, Eric, you did a wonderful job as bartender. Congratulations.
Hey, thank you.
I appreciate you. This will actually end up being on YouTube at the Fantasy Nightcap, which we just hit our 100 subscriber mark, so I can finally change that URL.
Get rid of that weird UID in your URL.
Good Lord, it's bad. It's like URX7V34 pi sign. Like, I don't know. It's weird. So we'll be changing that very, very shortly. I just need a couple of things changed real quick, but make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. It is the Fantasy Nightcap. And then make sure you follow me on Twitter at FFShaneB. And you can follow the show at Fantasy Nightcap. This show is on all of your preferred podcasting networks. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, because I've been working my ass off to get you there. So make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you follow on your preferred podcasting network. If you're feeling generous, please leave a review. The whole goal of this show is to give you fantasy information from a different aspect, I guess, to make you truly feel like you're just sitting at the bar with a couple buddies, listening and drinking beer. So hope you guys enjoyed. This was a really fun episode for me, and I hope for Eric as well, who you guys should follow at Fantasy Nav on Twitter. And this is the Fantasy Nightcap, where we serve you fantasy advice. Straight, no chaser. Cheers.